Welcome to Turning Hard Times to Good Times. I'm your host, Jay Taylor, and I'm really pleased to tell you that Kjirstin Breure, the President and CEO, Hydrograph Clean Power, is with me, as is Kerry Landis, and I'm really grateful to both of them because Kerry was the one that told me about Hydrograph Clean Power, and that was back late in 2024, and I didn't waste too much time in the new year to get it into my newsletter and start coverage on January 3rd, the first business day of the first newsletter date of the new year. So I looked at it as very compelling. Kerry spent a fair amount of time to convince me that I should spend more time on my own. And then I quickly got in touch with Kjirstin, and she was very, very helpful from the get-go. And in fact, I want to thank her for joining me in Toronto at the Metals Investor Forum on March 1st to tell the people there that story. And then she's been with me a couple more times for interviews, and I'm very, very grateful to her for that. The reason I wanted to get both of these folks on the show today is because I'd really like to dive down a little deeper on the technology of Hydrograph's graphene, because it is a unique product. Nobody else produces anything like it. You've heard a lot of graphene companies out there that have been disappointments. This is a completely different story, and so to understand the properties of Hydrograph's unique graphene, a synthetic graphene, I'm really grateful that they both joined me today. And also, I would just mention the name Kevin Bamborough. He has been very, very helpful in igniting the spark to get this stock rolling. The news has been out there, but it takes somebody with a big megaphone to get it out into the markets, and Kevin Bamborough is doing a tremendous job. He has also purchased a lot of shares himself, and I hope to interview Kevin sometime in the near future as well. A very interesting fellow and very well known in Toronto over the years as a very successful financier. So there's a lot of good people getting involved now, and it's a really exciting time. The stock is starting to take off, but we want to give you an idea that there's something real behind it. It's not just a puff of smoke. It's not just a stock. It's not just somebody pushing the share price higher. There's really something real to it. And so we're expecting sales pretty soon, revenues and all of that. But anyway, that's the reason I wanted to get Kevin and Kerry with us. Thanks to both of you for joining me today.
Thanks for having us on.
Very good. Thanks for having us.
You know, we've talked a lot. I had Kjirstin on, I think the second interview I did with you, Kjirstin, was about the economics. I couldn't believe it. I said, I've got to get her on, make sure I'm not imagining something, and you talked about that, and then Kerry came on more recently and talked about the economics. I mean, basically, it is, it's a company that has high revenue per ton, expected to be $250,000 to $800,000 per ton of material, of this graphene material. Operating costs are giving you margins of 70 to 80%, somewhere in that range. And very extremely low CapEx. I mean, this is a dream come true for someone like me that's in the mining industry that takes huge amounts of capital. And so it just really was very, very exciting. I don't know, Kerry, maybe just succinctly, anything you'd like to say about the economics and what you're seeing here?
Sure. Let me update just a little bit. You had me on about 2 weeks ago.
Right.
And remember back then, I made the comment, pointed out the economics behind saying that it could be a 20 bagger or a 100 bagger. Okay. So and before I kind of go down the numbers again today, but from a little different perspective, I wanted to mention that when you put that out January 3rd to its beginning to rally the middle of July here, the people had about 7.5 months where the stock was 20 cents plus or minus 8 cents. And its moving average was right around 20 cents. So from there today, the stock has gone up 500, it's a 5-bagger already.
Yeah.
And so using Kjirstin, Hydrograph put out a newsletter, I think you called it your July monthly briefing, that's what it is, and stated in that your plan is to, of course, locate in Texas, build a new facility. The CapEx is not going to necessarily be very big for that. It's just got to house the Hyperion unit, so it can't be that expensive. And then you plan to build 15 Hyperion units with about 350 metric tons per year. And I'm going to multiply that times the low end. You said 250,000 to 800,000 per metric ton is the range, but let's go the low end, 250. And of that, about 50,000 per metric ton of cost for acetylene and oxygen, let's say. And so left over was 200,000 per metric ton. Multiply that times the 350, and you get $70 million. And I used a PE last time of 10. Kevin, rightly so, said that's ridiculously low. And it is, because that's predominantly a mining type PE. So if I use a 15 PE, which is still ridiculously low, that gives you $1.05 billion. And divide that by today's shares outstanding, 266 million, you get approximately $4 a share. So from here, it closed at, I think it was 101 today.
US 20. Yeah.
So we're still talking about a four-bagger from here. But the thing that I wanted to point out is this is really a tech type of stock. And it probably warrants closer to 40, 50, even potentially higher PE. If I used a 45 PE, that triples the number that I just came up with. That's $12 a share. So the question that we've got to ask ourselves, throw into that the fact that you're planning to list on the NASDAQ here in 2026 as early as you can. Throw all that together, you have to ask yourself, is it over? Is it done? Or are we going to continue higher? And I'm betting on the fact that I laid it out this way. A 10-bagger from here is, and I know, Kjirstin, you can't say this, but as an investor, everybody's got to do their due diligence. But I'm betting on the fact that a 10-bagger is really very high probability. Kevin said, and I agree with him, that he thinks this is the first 100-bagger that he's ever seen that he could clearly state that it's a 100-bagger potential and potentially higher. So the bottom line of this, it's a kind of second go around of the analytics, the evaluation, is I need to stop talking, go buy more hydrographs.
Go
ahead.
Well, for those of us that are in the mining industry to hear that kind of talk, it's crazy. We have a hard time fathoming it, but it's a technology stock, and I want Kjirstin to talk a little bit about at some point here about why that is so. I mean, you've got a commodity that you can produce. It's a commodity that you and you alone are able to produce. You have patents for it, last another 10 or 11 years, I believe, something like that. But then beyond that, you have a patenting process as you are able to tailor or to engineer these different graphene products to meet specific needs of different industries. And I would imagine that all of those are patentable, and that you are, in fact, Dr. Sorensen and others in your team are already getting patents in place for different things like that. So it's a technology stock, and those kind of stocks, yes, 10, 15 PEs are absolutely ridiculous. You just have to look at the technology stocks that are out in the markets now. And, I used to look at these things and say, geez, they're selling 50 times sales. I mean, what kind of garbage is that? And then a few years later, they're starting to produce tremendous amounts of cash flow. And I think that's exactly what I believe is going to happen here. But Kjirstin, were you going to respond to something that Kerry just said?
I was going to add that apart from the obvious margins that we have available, we have a very robust patent portfolio. We have applied for more than 10 patents this year alone. And while we are always looking to broaden the moat around our technology, and we have had an additional patent granted on that moat in 2022, we are also applying for patents using our graphene, which again, only we can produce. So in that sense, it might not be a commodity in the
Yeah.
strict definition of the
Right.
word, but I see your point.
Yeah.
But regardless, with every additional patent, it's basically another opportunity, along with, of course, our exclusive ability to produce this graphene type, to potentially look at royalty models. And I know Kevin, for one, is a really big fan of this, because if there's a very niche application and maybe we license something for 50 or $100 million and we co-develop a product for some oil rig, if it's a machining fluid or whatever the example might be, there are very high value applications in industries that have very significant pain points. And I feel the more that we can start to find these opportunities, and of course, the more that we engage in application development work with our graphene, only looking at the graphene revenue is really not the full picture even. And I think if we look at some of these partnerships, if we look at these royalty models, we are very, very interested in securing non-dilutive capital, or at least less dilutive capital. And again, I think as we grow and as we really get the word out about this story, there's going to be so much more available to us.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Is indeed, and the patents, the patent portfolio is something that Kevin brought up in his interview with you that was very, very helpful, I think. And these patents go for 20 years, I think, generally, don't they? So you've got maybe 11 years left on the production of the graphene, but then beyond that, you're a first mover in this business, really, and the science behind it. And so I wanted to ask you, you're talking about ranges of revenues between 250,000 and 800,000, with the upper end being those that are engineered specifically for different purposes, whatever the industry needs are. Is there a lot more cost involved with producing say an $800,000 product than a $250,000 product?
Yes, in different ways. So with what we call our graphene derivative, so the graphene that we produce with the detonation is what we call FGA1 internally. And anyone that's curious, you can go on our website. We have our data sheets public. Feel free to do a deep dive and really learn what you're looking at, because I think it's important for the story. But then we have different derivatives. So it might be reactive graphene. We have what we call an activated graphene. So in some of these, it's, different equipment. It might be some labor. As we grow, of course, we're going to be automating really as much of that as we can. Sometimes we're adding chemical groups. So we're, of course, purchasing different chemicals. And sometimes just due to the process, we might lose some of the graphene. So the yield might be a little bit less. And there's a whole array of explanations for that from a technical standpoint, none that I'm willing to share because these are all trade secrets. But ultimately, though, these are very, very high margin graphenes, and they are higher margin than our traditional FGA1, even despite the, of course, additional labor and resources that we put into them.
Well, one of the things that's very remarkable about your process is it's very low energy cost. It's a spark, right? It's from the spark plug in your car. But anyway, Kjirstin, could you talk a little bit about the name of your company, Hydrograph Clean Power? So it sounds like you're a greenie.
We're clean. We're a clean tech company. So of course we convert hydrocarbons to graphene. So hydrograph, I think, is how that name makes sense for me. We do also produce hydrogen via syngas, because syngas is really our exhaust. Again, if we're exploding C2H2, acetylene, plus O2, oxygen, the oxygen and the hydrogen have to go somewhere. So a lot of that is exhausted as synthesis gas. And again, at scale, we would have an offtake agreement for it. If we wouldn't have an offtake agreement, we could easily pump it into a generator. I think I've mentioned this previously, and we could just sell that energy back to the grid or power our plant if we would need to.
Yeah, so I'd like to sort of help our viewers understand the difference between your graphenes and other graphenes that are on the market, because there's a lot of companies out there with graphenes in their name, and they're not really, maybe some of them don't even qualify as graphenes. Kjirstin, I know you've talked about this before, but if you could just quickly go over that idea of what's unique about about your graphene compared to others?
I might now, in this regard, be very bold and to say, I think it's very likely we're the only genuine graphene. And this is because, in my understanding, and this would be apart from chemical vapor deposition graphene, you could kind of think of us as explosion CVD. If you really dive into the processes, they're quite similar. But regardless, genuine graphene must be sp2 bonded, and we can go into that in a moment, and it must be 100% crystalline. And so I sometimes get frustrated. People get stuck on the purity. Well, a diamond is 100% carbon, but it's not graphene. It does not function the same. So if you don't have that chicken wire lattice, that sp2 bonding, that's really what creates it. Because of how those electrons are oriented, it is not graphene and it won't have nanomaterial properties. And what we find increasingly is that, for one, companies don't list sp2 bonding or crystallinity, and worse, they might say that it's 100% and then you test it and it is not. And that, unfortunately, we find all the time.
Mm.
And the reason for this is these tests are very expensive and often very time consuming. And so that's kind of the unfortunate snake oil that we found in the industry. And I
Mm.
absolutely think that as the industry grows and develops, it all comes out in the wash eventually. You can't continue to get away with an inferior product, but again, most companies are mostly sp2 bonded, mostly crystalline, but they're not genuine graphene. And we are not only, every time we turn on the reactor, it's exactly the same. We are consistent throughout our process as well.
Right. Consistency is a problem that other would-be graphene makers have had, and the ability then to apply those in industry, I guess, has caused a lot of trouble. So that's one thing. So that's pretty much what sets you apart, I guess. Also, there's a concept of fractal. Yeah, it's a fractal graphene. I don't know if you or Kerry could both maybe go into that, and also maybe for those of us who aren't chemistry students and have flunked chemistry, that would be me. Explain what sp2 bonding is exactly. If you could do it a little more specifically, Kerry, maybe you take a stab at that.
Yeah, I can help out with that. I won't go through a chemistry class here, but
Oh, thank you.
so there's S bonding, s orbitals, and p orbitals.
Right.
S is a
I
sphere,
actually knew that.
and p is a dumbbell shaped. Okay, and the acetylene actually is an sp bond. So what happens is when the exothermic reaction sparks, it gives the energy to break apart that sp bond, which is actually pretty strong, and breaks that apart, allows it to form then an sp2 bond, which is a lower energy state that provides some amount of energy. That's a la exothermic. The reaction itself provides some energy. All you have to do is give a little spark to get above the activation energy. And once you do that, then there's released energy from, like I said, the sp bond as it reforms into the sp2. An sp2 bond is really a very planar dumbbell-shaped 3 lobes that cause the carbon to combine in a hexagonal format. And those are pretty strong bonds. They're called sigma bonds. They're pretty strong. The one electron that's left over is just in a lone p orbital, and that forms between layers. So you've got layers now of graphene, a two-dimensional planar layer of carbon, and those layers between it are the electrons that are in the pi bond, which is very loosely held and allows the electrons to run back and forth and a la its conductivity, electrical conductivity, and its thermal conductivity. Also, because it's between and loosely bound, it doesn't hold the two planes together, so they're very slippery. They can go back and forth, a la the lubrication, the low friction coefficient on it.
Mhm.
So that really, so that's the benefit of the sp2 bond.
Mhm.
sp3 you don't want, sp you don't want. It's the sp2 that gives the planar graphene layers that provide us the wonderful properties.
And then that other electron that's out there is free to roam around, I
That's
guess.
correct. That's
And
correct.
you
Very
know,
loosely held.
yeah, I think it's Dr. Sorensen in the interview he did with Kevin. Um, he talked about that.
Mhm.
That electron is free to go out and sort of mix with anything, with all kinds
Right.
of
Right.
material, right? And he said that's because, if I have the quote here, because it's fractal, it just keeps spreading out, which is why it
Mhm.
is so cheap to produce.
Mhm.
So it just apparently it can just go and connect.
So,
Yeah.
so it's not the electron that, not the free electron that's
Oh,
really
okay.
the issue there, but the fractal nature is a fractal is just a recurring pattern.
Right, right.
And the hexagon that's formed, a lot of people will, I mean, Kjirstin said chicken wire, that's, if you look at that, it's a recurring pattern. Um, uh, the the carbon forms in what's called a hexagonal ring or a benzene ring, if somebody remembers their old organic chemistry. And a fractal, like there's lots of, I mean, it's in nature everywhere.
Mhm.
If you remember watching ice form on glass, when when the temperature goes away, latent heat goes away and it starts freezing, it forms a very recurring pattern.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
the frost. Well, what's going on in the Hyperion reactor is um, the exothermic reaction raises the temperature up to above 2300 Kelvin, and that rips apart all the sp bond. I mean, it rips apart everything: the oxygen, the acetylene. It rips it all apart, and then as the temperature slowly dissipates, they don't go into it right away, open it up. As it slowly dissipates, then those hexagonal sp2 bonded fractal rings can begin to slowly form on each other.
Oh.
And that's what gives, clearly, that's what gives them the tremendous purity. Uh,
Mhm.
in nature, um, uh, graphite is pushed and shoved and ground and all kinds of other oxidation particles that react to it. So trying to provide the energy to rip apart any of the oxidation particles and reorient that is very energy intensive. And in fact, uh, Kjirstin has put on their slide pack a demonstration of what the energy requirements are. And Hydrograph, this exothermic reaction makes it just doesn't cost them hardly anything to
Mhm.
create this.
Which is a major key to the economics and
And
the kind of
absolutely.
margins that we were talking about. I guess, Kirsten, I don't have anything to add on that.
I guess just to further clarify with the fractal aggregate and Kerry, that was wonderful. I think that that was very easily understood, I'm hoping, by the audience. But so if we look at the micro scale, so if we look just at our lateral particle dimensions, we do have the graphene lattice. And again, it's
Mhm.
that chicken
Mhm.
wire or honeycomb formation. And
Right.
it, just as Kerry mentioned, we have this kind of fractal morphology with all these tiny, tiny flakes forming in this repeating pattern. And that again is with this kind of sponge-like attribute that we have. We have a very gel-like graphene. So that we believe with our very high surface area, because we have these tiny flakes, and if you think of around the flake, around the particles, we would say those are defects. And defects sounds negative. It's not, it's kind of an opportunity for bonding. So what we've created, and this goes back to what I've talked about with nucleation, it's very easy when our fractal aggregates are mixed into something, they kind of spread around and absorb everything, kind of like sponges. And then all these little flakes get separated. And because we are 100% crystalline, the lattice is not disrupted. So with the lattice being fully intact, there's no hole in it, there's no molecule that shouldn't be there, like a sulfur
Right.
atom or something else to disrupt that mechanical benefit. We are very, very strong. So we kind of have these perfect little shards that go through everything, connect everything around it, kind of grabbing a hold of this other material. And then back to what Kerry mentioned, in between all those layers, that electron is shooting around. So if you have a lattice that's disrupted, there's a hole in the lattice or there's an
Mhm.
atom in the lattice, the electron is getting trapped.
Yeah.
You missed your conductivity. And that, we believe, is why, for example, I know this is another technical word, but our percolation threshold, which is really how much graphene we need to add to a material to make it conductive, is like an order of magnitude lower than a lot of graphenes. And that's because, again, the lattice is intact and we have that electron mobility really able to be its true form.
Excellent.
Mhm.
That's excellent
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. Well, so it has this ability to spread out and to grab a hold of different materials, right? And that's,
Mhm.
you know, in the interview that Kevin did with Dr. Sorensen, Kevin was saying, well, certainly not everything. It couldn't connect to wood, could it? And he said, oh, Dr. Sorensen said, oh, yes, it could. It could make it less combustible. I mean, it's just, I don't know. I have no idea about the range of applications. I mean, I guess we're just going to find out over time.
Only creativity provides the limitation on the use of graphene.
Yeah, so you need to have scientists who
Very
are
true.
curious. Dr. Sorensen says you need scientists who are curious,
That's
and they go
correct.
to the lab, and it was interesting when he talked to Kevin about when they set that first spark off, they all hid behind the furniture or whatever. They weren't sure what was going to happen.
That's
But
true.
and then there's and I would, you know, strongly advise people to see that interview with Kevin and Dr. Sorensen too.
Yes. Yes.
Very, very valuable, I think. And Dr. Sorensen, you know, talked all about how they did the experiment and how it came out. And it's very, very interesting, even to someone who's not of a science background. I think it's very interesting.
And Kevin certainly wasn't very reluctant about saying what he thinks is going to happen to this stock. This
Well,
company.
that's true, but that's true, and that's why I wanted to have a couple of scientists on here to talk about it
Right.
because,
Right.
yeah, hey, look, I've spent years and years with stockbrokers and financial people, and you know, there's a reason those guys have all the yachts out in the harbor in Toronto and Vancouver and places, and the real honest people, the people that actually create and make something, well, they do pretty well if they're successful. But
Sure.
anyway, we know the fast buck. Well, we know the people that know how to make money real fast. And actually, anybody that owns a stock is, at least on paper, is making money pretty fast right now. But I don't know, in terms of kind of applications, Kjirstin, could you give us an idea? I mean, the idea of wood, it wouldn't have occurred to me that you could do something with wood, but what are some of the applications that, you know, practical applications we might expect Hydrograph to be involved with in the future without giving away any trade secrets?
Sure. Well, I think, back to Kerry's point, it's kind of your creativity. I would be hard pressed to think of something we can't do in terms of material interaction.
Hmm.
We're only scratching the surface for graphene technology. What we are going to do, I think, in the near term is relatively boring to probably what we'll be doing in 10 or 20 years. I'm very excited to get to that point, but really right now, and again, just going back to our economic model, we want to see revenue really as soon as possible. So we are steering it heavily towards composites and coatings. And I have touched on this on a few different interviews, but we see a lot of movement with engineering fibers. They're just extremely versatile. And whether it's a nylon PA6 fiber, we have interest from defense contracting companies. It might be the actual US military, it might be chemical companies. These can be used for civilian textiles. It could be used for uniforms, for ballistic protection materials, for aerospace components, you name it. And so we find these very highly engineered fibers. They're quite difficult to continually push the material performance of. And we have really strongly proven that we are able to do so. And I think that we've kind of created a niche in that space. And again, there's huge volumes here. But once we start to see revenue from applications like this, and I've of course talked about energy storage devices, lots and lots of interest there, and industrial coatings. I think that once we kind of have these in hand and once these are generating revenue, we will be looking at everything. We also have a lot of interest, of course, in concrete and lubricants. Those are massive industries alone.
So I mean, it's hard to, it's just mind-boggling, actually, the potential. And that's why I think one of the reasons the stock is starting to move is because a few people are starting to understand that vaguely, like I do. I think I do. But in terms of, we're all looking for those first contracts. And I've told some of my friends, I'm not sure you want to wait until the contract is announced, because I'm not sure that you're going to be able to buy the stocks then, or you're going to pay a lot more for it. But Kjirstin, you talked recently about an 18-month trial process. Could you get into that a little bit? It takes time, especially with large corporations, to make decisions. Could you talk a little bit about that 18-month trial process that you go through with different companies?
Sure. And again, this is very dependent on the company we work with. It's very dependent on the material. Let's assume a company is willing to move quickly and we're not losing time, let's say at each stage gate. So we start, with lab testing, especially if we don't have the data. Mostly this is happening at the Geek. And we will call it this pilot stage. And this could be for composites and coatings. It could be 2 to 3 months. It might be 6 months. For energy storage devices, it's really always a minimum of 9 months. For lubricants and oils, you're looking first, at these pilot scale rheology tests, and then you move to engine tests. It's so many steps to kind of prove out that material that, again, there's so much nuance here because it depends on what the end use is going to be. But once you've accomplished that and you have your data sets that are going to impress your customer, then you move to the industrial trial. And that's when you work much more closely with a customer. And so you can imagine with really large companies how much time can be lost when someone has to go back to their corporate team, and then you have all of these meetings. How are we going to plan the next project, budgets, all of the things are considered. And then the industrial trial is, I would say for most applications, a minimum of 8 months. And to go back to more of our model, this is why we really prioritize the compounding program that we have, working with these third parties. The more we can cut off that first stage and we can teach these third parties how to use and how to process our graphene. And again, the more data we have, the more we can kind of jump ahead, hopefully as close as we can to that industrial section. And then once we've proven that we can do this at higher volumes and we prove that we can make the components that the customer is requesting, of course, then it goes to contract negotiations. And again, to reiterate, for a bigger company, that can be quite a long process. It really depends on how involved it is, but we will be continuing to update the market. We have many irons in the fire at this point, upwards of 70 customers. The list is really growing by the day. And like I mentioned in the beginning of the call, it's not just the graphene sales, it's partnerships, it's interest from the government. We have patents that I really do believe that we can generate royalties from. And even if that's an upfront agreement to do development work together, there is a lot available to us. And as the interest is growing, we absolutely expect to have abundant news flow as we move into 2026.
You mentioned ballistics, I think, and what sort of characteristic of your graphene would lend itself to ballistics?
Well, it's a very high strength material. So if we think of a soldier's uniform, you want it to be light enough that they can still maneuver, and you want it, of course, to have impact resistance. You want abrasion wear. And so if we're making, let's say, something that is a nylon fiber or an aramid fiber, which you'd know as Kevlar, all these materials, the more that we can make it easy for someone to move around, but also be protected, graphene can add huge benefits.
Well, I mean, I think there's just so many different things. As I say, we can't imagine right now. Kjirstin, you talked about setting up a plant in Texas. that you would be connecting with with probably a natural gas company or a company that would produce the acetylene, have it piped right into your plant. Is that something we can look forward to in the near future? When do you think that might be? I know
Very
you've already announced that it's going to happen, but that we might
Yes.
learn who you're going to be working with there.
I am hopeful, and just to again reiterate, there's a lot that goes into this. We're building a greenfield project. There's the actual supply agreement for the acetylene. There's a lot of pieces that we obviously need to see eye to eye on. And of course, with all of this is all the permitting and regulations around acetylene and naturally our production process. So there's a lot of things that need to be clarified between two parties in order to give comfort. And that's really why this has taken the time that it has. But I would say we're likely just over a month away. And then once that is signed, we will, of course, be announcing the company's name. We will be announcing the location of the facility. They've been wonderful to work with, and we could not be more excited to break ground.
Well, that's a month away until the lawyers get involved, perhaps. And then
Oh, no, this is why it's long, because lawyers have been involved.
yeah.
Lots of back and forth, as is
I know.
natural, lots of little comments, but all things considered, it's gone very well.
As a banker years ago, I know about lawyers. I can tell you that. Well, I don't know if there's anything else, Kerry, you'd like to add. I want to ask both of you, a summary question to comment on it. But anything else you'd like to throw out there?
Do you have an anticipated build out time for the facility?
Yes, we are estimating at least 8 months. I'm saying between 8 and 10. We would like to be breaking ground quite soon. So assuming this is signed in the next month, we have really all the teams in place. We have the design, we have everything ready to go. So we should be thinking this could be open, let's say by the end of Q2 next year.
Are you going to be building the Hyperion, the 25 metric ton Hyperion units in parallel with that? And will they not be functioning until you get that facility built, or will you have some of them at Kansas State University?
Yeah, so we have our facility in Manhattan near Kansas State University where we will probably be building, I hate to call it a prototype because it's not really redesigned, but the larger model. We'll likely do some additional testing on that one model. And then once we're completely sure that we're ready for commissioning multiple models, we will build them in parallel.
Okay, because it's not that difficult to move them down there if you get them built before the facility is underway.
True, but we will also be opening our Austin headquarters either in December or of January 2026. And so that will be an additional area where we can not only and importantly hire additional talent, but we'll have that assembly and design
right down there
as well. Very, very close.
Very good. Excellent.
You mean scientists would rather live in Austin than
I'm not sure about Dr. Sorensen, but there are quite a few scientists in Austin.
He can have his cornfields if he wants them, I suppose. Anyway, I just like to sort of, unless you have something else to add, I'd just like to sort of conclude by asking both of you to sort of, in your own words, just highlight what sets you apart from the other graphenes and why. I know of one graphene company that's working on batteries, for example, but you're not just looking at one application, you're looking at all these different applications. So just, the SP2 bonding, the fractal aspects that you talked about, all of that, but just in summing up, what makes you different from all the other graphenes out there and why it's such a much bigger picture than what you might hear from the smaller companies, the companies that are one-trick ponies, so to speak?
I think that's very easy to answer because even if the technical part was lost, what I really mean to say is I think we're the only graphene producer.
Okay. And so by only,
yes.
So define the graphene has to, you're one layer thick of carbon. I guess the other aspects of it.
Well, I think that's an excellent point that you're bringing up because people have talked a lot about monolayer graphene, of course, being that one atomic layer, usually made with chemical vapor deposition. But And another important attribute of our graphene, apart from being fractal, which I feel like we've really defined, is we are turbostratic. And I think I've touched on this on a couple other appearances, but I really want to make a point that turbostratic graphene, there's a huge gap between these layers. So it's not really tightly coupled. And like graphite, you can imagine they're
Pushed, or,
Right.
yeah,
pushed really,
compressed
really
together.
hard against each other. And with graphene, you have a little bit of space, but turbostratic is a lot of space. And that means is it really functions in practice like monolayer. So in every way that you look at our graphene and all of the metrics that we have, we are the highest quality. And that I understand it's a very bold statement for me to say we're the only one. If you're going to be really I think precise in the definition of graphene. I do actually believe that. Of course, others have maybe, let's say 80 or 90% sp2 bonding or 80, 90% crystallinity, whatever it is.
Mhm.
I do believe in the strict sense, we're the only genuine graphene production company at industrial scale.
Mhm. Wow. Okay. And Kerry, you'd like to
Yeah, so
summarize?
that is exactly the main reason I really focused in on Hydrograph is I recognized it was the only company out there that has pure graphene. And this specific type of graphene that's the most functional has the most application. And that combined with, having analyzed enough companies, having low capex to produce, low energy to produce. And I was concerned originally about, is this just going to be a commodity type sale? No, it's a value added sale. So, and then I was concerned about it being licensed with the risks that go with that. And that went away when Kjirstin took over and changed the model. So I mean, on every level, I think this is the only company around that other companies are going to buy graphene from Hydrograph for their application.
Terrific. Well, I think that's a good summary. And the stock is going nuts. Some people say it's going crazy. It's almost hyperbolic, and it makes some people very uneasy. And yeah,
Could I
just want
say,
yeah,
could I say just a point to that
yes,
just before we close?
sure,
So as an investor, we take a look and we watch. There's a statistical band that goes around a moving average called Bollinger Band,
sure.
and the stock rally has been very smooth, very organized. It's riding the top level of the Bollinger Band, so that means there's a big push of buyers.
Hmm.
It means that there's a shortage of stock available for all the buyers that want it.
Hmm.
So so it's come up now to the point of a dollar. I don't see any gaps, any high volatility. It's just a very organized, very smooth rally, and I think it's because the word is getting out. From probably a lot from Kevin, but as you multiply people that get it out, I mean, Doug Casey asked you about it.
Yes.
So it is getting out, and the story is so compelling that don't expect any huge downdrafts on this.
And if I could add one more point as well on
Absolutely.
that. I had talked about how many warrants we had outstanding, about 59 million, and the dollar value on that's more than 10 million Canadian. I think it was like 10.6. We have seen a huge amount of warrants being exercised. So we have well over 6 million in the bank now. And so again, this is a privileged place for us to be sitting in, but we are not looking currently for capital. And so we are absolutely going to be delivering on more of our milestones. We're going to continue to grow the company. Of course, we're still targeting NASDAQ, but again, I really think that we're going to be seeing minimal dilution going forward. We are really looking at every other avenue to be funding the company.
Right. And
Right
of
along with
course,
that, I was going to ask you one more thing if I could. So listing on the NASDAQ, that has certain criteria that goes with it.
Mhm.
Uh, and one of them is, I think, stock price, if I remember right.
Yes.
And, you know, there was some discussion a while back about, okay, are you going to have to do a stock split just to try to, or a consolidation to try to raise the price? I don't see that necessarily as being required to happen.
I
Um,
agree.
okay.
I don't want to count on it because we might have to do some small rollback, but honestly, if Kevin continues to do his thing, he's a fractal himself. I think it could be seen organically. And you know, we've hit all the other metrics. We have the shareholder equity, we have everything in place. So that being the last thing, and again, because we're really only targeting that Q1,
Mhm.
it's completely possible that we hit it.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
let's
What is the dollar amount? I'm not
Is it
even
4
sure.
or 5?
Four or
What's the
five.
dollar value?
Yeah. Anyway,
there's
You
different
remember?
criteria, but usually 4 for us.
Yeah, that's what.
all right. Well, thank you very much, both of you, for spending the time, and we'll keep an eye on things and look forward to keeping up with it. As you're available, Kjirstin, I can't imagine. I think I've said to you many times, there's going to come a time when, you know, when Bloomberg and CNBC and those people call you and say, oh, yeah, I remember that guy Taylor back there, 16-cent stock.
Credit to you for getting me there.
I kind of remember him when it was 16 cents a share, but anyway, I'm very happy that things are going the way they are. But I did just want to have you two on to talk about, you know, from a technical point of view, just so people have a notion. You know, when you see a stock run like this, a lot of people get scared and they say, geez, you know, especially people in the mining space, like
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, you know, the hype, the hole in the ground with a liar at the top is the old saying. The stock takes off, everybody gets excited. Next thing you know, kaboom on the downside, and your wife leaves you, and you're camping out under a bridge somewhere. So that's not what we want to see, and we don't expect to see. But thanks, both of you, for providing the more understanding about why people should take this story seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jay and Kjirstin.
Thanks to both of you.
Thank you, Jay.
Okay, folks, that's it for today's this week. Actually, next week, somebody else, I'm not sure yet who, but keep your eye on your inbox for my Substack messages. Until then, goodbye and God's blessings to you.